Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. And today I wanted to talk about a phrase or a sentiment that I've heard bandied about quite a bit from all different sides of various different arguments. And it's the notion that somebody's arguing about an issue with comics or even with the films or a television show or whatever, and somebody says, it's just comics. It's just a movie. They're just comics. They're only comics. Leave it alone. Stop getting so upset. Why would anybody react this way over it's just a movie or whatever? And there's just so much wrong with that statement. Now, to be fair, sometimes it's said with good intentions, and it's maybe just people who are saying it. I would agree with what they're trying to say, but I think that they don't realize the implications that come with saying that. For example, I was listening to a live stream with some YouTubers that I really enjoy their work the other day, and they were talking about one of the instances of somebody giving some death threats or something on Twitter over something or another, and one person said, they're just comics. Everybody just needs to calm down. They're just comics. Now, I totally agree that death threats comic books are not worth having death threats over, but that's not because comic books aren't worth anything. That's not because they're just comic books. It's because nothing's worth giving somebody a death threat over. That's just kind of common sense. The notion that comic books are just some silly little entertainment is really short-sighted. And like I said, to be fair, I don't think this person, or a lot of people when they say it in that context, I don't know if they necessarily mean to insinuate that that's the comic books aren't worth much or whatever. And again, I'm broadening this out to movies, films, or whatever, because I've heard this a lot. For example, anybody who's followed my work via Facebook or YouTube for a while knows that I feel very strongly about the DCEU's version of Superman and their universe and everything, and how they've created it and how they are just insisting on running with it, even with the upcoming Justice League film, and how that's just not, it's not Superman at all. It's not what he, would do. He didn't need to go through that to become, great and good and everything. And, I've gone on and on about that. And I got really upset even when it was just Man of Steel having been released. And people have told me, just calm down. Gosh, it's just a movie. It's not just a movie. So let me explain what I mean by all of this. Why it's not just a movie, or they're not just comic books, or it's not just a TV show or whatever. Psychologists will tell you that as humans, we are the result of the stories that we tell ourselves. That's on a cultural level and on an individual level. So everything that you believe, your religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, or lack thereof, everything that you fear, everything that you aspire to, everything that you think about yourself, your own self-perception, all of these are products of the stories we tell ourselves about these things. So stories I'm not insinuating that they're all false stories or they're all fake or whatever. I just mean, even if it's something absolutely true, I'm still calling it a story in this respect, because we're telling it in a narrative form to ourselves. So as a culture, that's true as well. Patriotism and the American way, and truth, justice, and the American way, and what values we believe should be exhibited in elected leaders and such, that's all a product of the stories we tell ourselves. So if we as human beings, and as a culture, as a society, are so affected by stories, how can anyone be so naive to think that the fiction stories we surround ourselves with aren't going to have a profound impact on us? Of course they do. Absolutely, of course they do. When you have certain characters, I'll just give you an example. When you have characters like Superman, or like Captain America, who have been these just stalwart standards for us to aspire to, not realistic in terms of, oh yeah, we know lots of people like that everywhere. They're the epitome of purity and of doing the right thing. And again, it's that standard for us to aspire to. When you feel the need to rip that down and to make that more relatable and more realistic and flawed, and then you're bringing that standard down. There is no working your way up to that kind of standard. That's what characters like Spider-Man or Green Arrow and such for. Those characters are for inspiring us to get up when we fall down and to keep working and to keep trying. But even those characters don't work unless we have that high standard. Those characters who set that high bar for us, like Superman, Captain America, even Wonder Woman when she's done correctly and such. So the characters matter. They serve a profound purpose in our personal and cultural mythologies and psychologies. Now, not to everyone, of course. I mean, not everyone is affected by Superman or this character or that character in that manner, but they affect enough people to the point where they are important. And so are their stories. It's never just a comic book. It's this piece of American folklore. It's a story. Denny O'Neil has a great account of when he was editing DC Comics at the time that they were going to kill off Jason Todd's Robin. And they had done the big thing, letting the fans vote on it and such, if he'd live or die. And it was a big thing in the media because Batman and Robin, such beloved characters or whatever. But your average person just hearing that story who wasn't a comic book reader really didn't understand what the deal was or the facts of it or whatever. They were thinking Dick Grayson, their Robin from the old Batman show was going to be killed off in this gruesome manner and such, where in fact Jason Todd was the second Robin and quite a brat anyway, at least by that point. So Denny O'Neil tells the story that he was working there at DC and he just went into a deli or something for lunch at that point, and he has a little Batman button on his lapel, and someone asked him about it and he said, "Oh, well, I edit DC Comics." And the guy said, "Hey Bernie, here's that schmuck who wants to kill off Robin." And, immediately against them. People who never read comic book in their life probably, but felt very strongly about it. And Denny O'Neil says what he took away from that was, "I'm not just an editor of a comic book. I'm not just in the entertainment industry." He said, "I'm the caretaker of American folklore." And that is so true. Would to God that more comic book editors understood that gravity of their positions and of their responsibilities to the characters and the stories that they're telling. It's not just try whatever you want, throw it against the wall and see what sticks, and let's see if this story will work or whatever. Yes, ultimately, the public decides which stories are going to make it into the mainstream consciousness and what stories are going to be remembered and not. But writers and editors have a far greater responsibility than they quite often realize. So it's never just a comic book. It's never just a film. People are upset about these things because they mean a great deal to people. I know that for me, for example, the release of the Man of Steel film for me coincided with a personal tragedy in my own life. And it was just one of those tragedies that really makes you question things, your identity and your sort of place in the world and, stuff like that. And, everybody, well, not everybody, but chances are you're going to have something like that happen in your life. And it's really world perception shattering when it happens. And people don't always come back from that. Sometimes they end up very embittered. Sometimes they end up, drastically altered in some way or another. Not always for the good, certainly. And for me, characters like Superman had always been my moral crutch, so to speak, my example, my inspiration, my encouragement to always find the right way, to always try to respond. And of course I don't. I'm human. I fail all the time. But that's been my standard and my goal. And at the same time, to have somebody release a film about quote unquote Superman in Man of Steel, that's just continued in the horrible direction they've taken it with Batman v Superman, and now trying to portray all of this unearned hope that he's supposed to stand for in Justice League. Oh, he's going to return and he's going to be so great and inspirational. No, you can't. Sorry, that ship has sailed. It's not going to work. That's completely unearned, all that nonsense you're trying to say in the trailers. So it was really quite a slap in the face to have somebody trying to rip down my character, my hero, just because they couldn't handle him just being good with his upbringing with Martha and Jonathan there. And they had to tear that all out and have to give him some failings and some tragedy and some moral ambiguity and some doubts. And just because they have that in their own lives, it's ridiculous. I wrote a blog post months ago, actually before Batman v Superman came out, when it was close to coming out. It was called Icons Matter. I think I was going to name it Comics Matter at one point, but I was talking about those characters, those icons. And I'll put a link to it down in the description. It was pretty popular, and I was talking about why these characters matter, what they do for us in our society, and I even used the analogy of what if we did this to, say, Mickey Mouse or something, and tried to show by that perhaps more drastic example why this is a problem. But I'll end this on a quote from that. I say towards the end of that article, "Folklore, our culture's mythology, is a reflection of the values and principles of our society. It's not malleable on a storyteller's whim. If you take a beloved, safe, and moral character and corrupt his universe until he's broken and morally ambiguous, you've not only corrupted the character, you've corrupted our culture, and through eventual repercussions, you've corrupted our future. You've taken away one of the few characters that made us reach higher just so you and the audiences could feel better about not wanting to stretch. These characters in these stories teach us how to respond, teach us how to act. And it's because we ourselves as a culture have molded them. We have given our feedback to storytellers over the years, and we have helped shape these characters into what we want them to be and what we need them to be to continue along the path shaped by the stories that we've told ourselves in other forms. So hopefully this makes sense. I know it gets a little cerebral, but it boils down to the fact that nothing's ever just a comic. It's never just a movie. It's never just a story, just a character or whatever. Even if you're dealing with a story or a film that's not about a beloved character or a beloved, icon, it's still a story, and the values of that story are going to affect the people who spend time with it. That's not to say that you can't just go watch a random film or whatever and completely be affected for life by its values or lack thereof. Of course not. But in general, the things you spend time with the most are going to affect you. That's just the nature of being a human. We're going to be influenced by what we spend time with. And that's going to reflect in our behavior and in our worldview and in our aspirations and fears and so forth. So people are never going to stop saying that phrase, but I really wish they would. I think it's very poorly thought out when they say it, even if they have good intentions behind it, trying to prove a point that's true, but it's unrelated. So that's my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear about the stories that are profoundly important to you. What characters have meant a lot to you and taught you how to respond to things in your life. I know for me that's been, quite a few characters, but certainly Superman has been a big part of that, and Captain America to a great extent as well. So let me know in the comments, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the superhero stories you love. Thanks for watching.